I am often not brought on until like there's been a bit of a mess made in the organization, which is fine because it's my job to make sure that all that's cleaned up and that we have like a clean slate to continue moving and building on top of. Hopefully, this will be a message to people to like make that hire before you start to build like a bunch of processes or like have a bunch of unopened or open-ended tasks. When I came into Crowdbotics, I came in as like an operations consultant, and worked like very closely with the founder and CEO. And at the time, they were pre-Series A, so they had a pretty significant seed round. This was like back in the days of like nice size checks so long ago. They had an engineering team, which was fantastic. They had like a very lightweight version of a like product management team. And their whole premise was like building applications, like building application for customers. So literally any customer could come to them and say like, I have a business, I want to build an application for it, whether it's like a piece of software, whether it's like a mobile application, you name it, like they could build it. The problem was internally, the organization was operating under this assumption that, okay, we know what the customer journey is. Like we know what needs to happen internally and like who needs to be tapped in at when. So you go through the sales cycle and then you're going to be handed off to services and then services does their thing and then they're handed off to like after services is completed everything. Well, that's great, but like the customer has no idea that this is happening, and there's a lot of like balls that are getting dropped in terms of communication. There's no expectation alignment that's happening. Um, there was a whole bunch of assumptions that were being made, and even on the internal side of things, of okay, like we know that like once sales has done their thing and sold the customer, they're going to be handed off at services. But do we know that like what actually needs to be handed off from the sales to services handoff? Is it a scope of work? Is it like information on the customer? Where is this information living? So it was just a lot of assumption based uh, things that were going on in the company, that worked for them for the short term, but as they were scaling like incredibly quickly, it became like a problem, not just internally for like organizational process purposes, but also externally for customer expectation. So we really had to like sit down as a team and quite literally like map out the customer journey, both the external facing part of the journey, the internal facing part of the journey, really be explicit in like who is involved internally and where are they involved and when and what exactly are they executing on. Where is this information living and how is the handoff going to be as clean as possible from like sales to services and beyond? And for the customer as well, like how are we communicating like this journey to the customer? Okay, now that you've like paid a bunch of money for us to build an application, here's what's going to happen next. Because you definitely don't want your money kind of like going into a black hole and then like hoping things go well. Like communication is everything. It's going to set the tone for the remainder of the relationship. It's going to save you a lot of hassle as a company just to be explicit and the expectations that the customer should have too. As these early stage, very early stage, I would say always like pre-Series A organizations are kind of like putting their thoughts together about who they need to bring in, to really like help understand what position their business is in and how it impacts their end customer. You need to bring in someone that has a good grasp on the operation side of thing, process that has a focus on the internal side, but also the external side and how that impacts the customer. Because if you don't have customers, if you're not keeping them happy, they're not going to stick around and there goes your business. And you need to do that sooner than later. It should be like an absolute priority for every founder to keep that on top of mind.